It is really hard for me not to geek out over today's guest. Today's guest is somebody that I have a lot of respect for. He does some incredible things, but Mike Spagnola, the president and CEO of SEMA, welcome to the show.
Well, I hope I can live up to that introduction, but glad to be here. Thanks for the invite.
Well, as I was diving through your bio, I don't even know how to properly encapsulate everything that you've done in your life. You've done some pretty amazing things. You are a true car guy through and through, and leading a pretty special organization, right? With everything that SEMA does for all of us car lovers that are out here. You get to lead the charge on all of it. It's a pretty special opportunity, isn't it?
I still pinch myself every day. It's a lot of hard work. It's, lots of 10, 12-hour days, weekends. I just came off of a long weekend of working through some different issues, but it's worth it. I pinch myself that I get to do this, to represent it. It wasn't in my career plan, but I'm so glad to be here and get to represent the industry and SEMA and all that it does and fight for everything that we think is important.
Yeah. And there are a lot of things that we'll talk about over the course of this podcast, but I want to start with you and how you got started in the automotive world. Was it something that as a kid, you dreamed about cars and you wanted to get involved in some way, or was it somebody that really helped shape your life and point you in this direction? What got you interested in this industry?
Yeah, it's really interesting. They say it takes a village to raise a kid, and I actually grew up in San Gabriel, California, in the San Gabriel village, and there were so many things that affected what I loved and what I wanted to do. And I can remember just as a 6-year-old building model cars and taking bicycles apart and all those things that a lot of us do. But there were a couple of dads on the street that were into cars and motorcycles and boats, and so I got that influence. My dad was a bartender. My mom was an opera singer. So cars were for transportation. But I just had this love from the very beginning. Grew up in the 60s where late 60s where some of the older kids, when coming back from Vietnam, had a few bucks in their pockets. And so they were buying Corvettes and Mustangs and Camaros. And I would run out on the curb when I'd hear them from a couple blocks away and hear them coming down the street just to stand and watch them go by. So I had that as an influence. I had a brother-in-law. My sister married a guy that owned a couple sports car centers in Glendale, California, and he was an SCCA racer. So at a young age of 10, he would take me to the racetrack. We'd go out to Riverside and Willow Springs and all those sorts of places. And, I got to watch him race at his sports car centers. He would allow me to change oil on older Ferraris and those sorts of things. It was just an amazing experience for me to get to do all those sort of things. And then in high school, I already had this love for cars. My grandparents gave me a 55 Mercury that wasn't running when I was 13, took it apart, didn't exactly know what I was doing, but had a few tools, took it apart, got it running. And unfortunately at 14, my dad caught me driving it. He came early from work one day and caught me driving it down the street. And that was the last time I saw that car. But it was those sorts of things. High school, I did a auto shop program. As a junior, we were a 1-period auto shop. And then as a senior, I got to do a 2-hour vocational auto shop. That school, San Gabriel High, still does that program today, but was very involved in that. And then as a senior, in October of my senior year, 2 guys came into our classroom, and one had gone to that school. And the other was somebody from SEMA, and they offered a $200 scholarship to the best automotive student. And I was able to win that scholarship. The guy that came in that was the prominent guy from SEMA was Mickey Thompson. And so he had gone to that high school, and so, I had that as an influence. Went on to, while I was in college, worked at a Datsun dealership, really literally as a delivery driver, kind of worked my way up through the OE side of that, and then went into the import cars field. So just a lifelong love and passion for cars. Worked hard at every job I had. I still feel like I'm a student of the industry today. I still read every trade I can. still try to study everything I can, still try to understand the marketplace. It's shifting all the time. And so you got to stay on top of it. But I'm blessed. I really do feel like we all have these God-given talents. And I had this love and passion for cars that I was able to make a career out of it. And it's just an amazing opportunity for me.
Well, one heck of a career you've made out of it. I do have to ask, you grew up in like the pinnacle of hot rodding in California at the center of it all. I am so jealous of the time that you got to grow up in California. That's kind of where so much of everything started, isn't it? Like right in that time frame.
Yeah, it is. I mean, I would also tell you the story. I mean, there's so many stories, but I would ride my bicycle over to Pete and Jake's, which was a hot rod shop in Temple City. And that turned out to be Pete Chaporis, who was an amazing hot rod builder, built the California Kid and a bunch of other stuff. And he would get his haircut done at the same place I would. So the barber there would call me when Pete was coming in, so I could have an excuse to get over there just to, talk to Pete, those sorts of things. So yeah, that whole hot rod scene, all of that. But I was probably the odd man out. I wasn't, while in high school, guys were into, muscle car, 69 Chevelles and that sort of stuff. They were cool to me, but I was really more of an import guy, right? I was into Datsuns and sports cars and SCCA racing and road racing. Wasn't much of a drag racer. Went out, then the old Irwindale Speedway, two Irwindale Speedways ago, would go out there and down to Orange County and those sorts of things for drag racing. But it really wasn't my scene. I was probably of that auto shop and that crowd and cruising. We'd cruise Valley Boulevard on Friday nights and Whittier Boulevard on Saturday nights. But I was doing it in import cars. So it was a little different for me and wasn't always seen as one of those guys,
I think, in my personal opinion, I always feel like a car guy is a car guy, right? It doesn't matter. They might have a different interest than I do, but if they've got that passion and they've got just the love for everything cars that I feel like I do and in a lot of my friends do, I think there's just a level of respect that goes along with that. And I don't care what you're driving, if you have the wherewithal to tear into something and make it better than what it was prior to it coming to you. I just think that's the coolest thing in the world. And I think that's where a lot of the true talent shows through too. It doesn't matter what you're working on. If you can do something cool with it, there's a lot of love from me.
Yeah, absolutely. That's one of the great things about SEMA is we're, even as we try to expand our SEMA show and some of the other things we do, we really just want to celebrate the whole passion of the automotive industry, from lowriders to lifted trucks. And, we get to play in that world, but really, it used to be Ford versus Chevy, and I guess some of that still goes on, but the ability to celebrate everything in cars, right? And just mobility, from customized Teslas to 32 hot rods, right? And
Cool.
Everything in between, EV conversions and just, if you come to the SEMA show and if you see what's going on, every year you just say, well, it can't get any better than this. And the builds just can't get any better. But boy, you just see the craftsmanship and the welds now that, I mean, probably like you, I like to look at all the detail and what creative artwork, guys and girls can make out of cars.
It's incredible. If those of you that are listening haven't been to SEMA, I think everybody knows what SEMA is for the show, and we'll talk a lot about the organization itself in a little bit. But I do want to talk about the show because I think it's one of those things where, for me, forever growing up, it was a bucket list thing to do. And when I think probably the first time I went was probably 8 years ago, I'd say, and I've probably gone 5 times or 6 times now. And you're right. Like I don't know that you can ever have enough time to get around to look at everything, and even things that aren't right up my alley. Like you can't help but sit back and just look in awe of the craftsmanship and like you talked about the welds or there was a gentleman that had, I followed him forever and I can't remember his name right now, but he had a lowrider that was all chromed out. And I'm not a lowrider guy at all, but that it was, the craftsmanship behind it was incredible.
Yeah.
And it's just the stories behind it. And uh, lucky enough to even have some of the builders around to be able to really kind of dive into and look at what they're doing. It's just incredible stuff.
It is. And the yeah, as you say, and you know, we now have this, of course, we have this battle of the builders that's been around for a while, but now we have this young guns. And so you've got young builders competing against each other. And I got to tell you, there's a few that you can't tell the difference between somebody that's just got started in the last 5 years and some of the older craftsmen. The talent that's coming through today, you know, we hear these things about, well, the industry is going away or people aren't as interested as they used to be. I don't see it that way. I still see the talent and the amount of builds that are coming through are just incredible.
Yeah. Yeah, it really is. And I talked about SEMA and actually the Apex side last year in going to both of them. And I just told just my advice in general for going down for the first time is to have some form of game plan, because it can be overwhelming to try and get to everything and try to see everything. And even, just the property itself is just gigantic, right? So having some form of game plan together so you can actually see everything that you truly want to see, I think is imperative. I think having a game plan going into that week is huge.
I agree.
How much do technicians really make? At WrenchWay, we work with some of the best shops and dealerships across the country, and we've discovered that technicians often earn more than what some online sources suggest. For example, the Bureau of Labor Statistics reports that technicians make an average of $47,000 per year, but we know that's not reflective of the true earning potential of technicians. We've teamed up with ASE to create an online technician pay tool, a free, easy-to-use resource for both aspiring technicians and those already in the automotive and diesel industries. This tool lets you explore real pay data with customizable searches by industry, shop type, location, and experience level. Check it out at wrenchway.com/pay or follow the link in the show notes. We also encourage current technicians to anonymously submit their own pay data to help make the tool even better for everyone. Lastly, thank you for your continued support as we work to promote and improve careers in automotive and diesel. We couldn't do it without you. All right. So obviously SEMA is a lot more than just the show, but I do want to take a minute to just talk about the show and the impact that it has, and frankly, just how cool it is. Every year I go, I kind of am overwhelmed at some level, or am really just kind of, there's just so much to see, right? And I think that if you don't go in with a plan and you don't know where you're going, it can quickly kind of swallow you up, because you'll see all kinds of different things that are just amazing. So at some level, is it overwhelming to you as somebody that's running the thing, or is it just cool to see each and every year?
No, it's definitely overwhelming. It's funny because I'll come home and my kids or other people say, well, did you see this car? Did you see that car? Did you see this booth? Those sorts of things. And no, I have to catch up on video and, just scour for a few days after that of kind of cool stuff that happened during the show. But yeah, it's 1.2 million square feet of booth spaces. So just manufacturers on all those booths, 1.2 million square feet. It's 3 million square feet of campus. So you think about the outside and where there's drifting and there's all sorts of things going on. It's just amazing that happens. 160,000 people, buyers and sellers, come together. It's a B2B show. It is open now to the public on Fridays, which I'm excited about. And so it's just overwhelming. There, 1,600 cars show up, custom cars show up, and to see the builds every year and to see the creativity and to see the artwork, it really is artwork. It's rolling artwork, and people use that term, but and it's everything from a Ferrari to a Volkswagen, customized And just all that happens right there in Las Vegas. And it's all car people, right? It's all men and women that are into cars. And, I call it old home week for some of us, but the opportunity to just catch up. Even as a manufacturer, when before joining SEMA, I was a SEMA member as a manufacturer, but even competitors, fierce competitors, we would say hi to each other and get along and even maybe go have a beer. But and there were some was very friendly with, where we would play practical jokes on each other. But it just all of that. It's just the opportunity, of business to business, buyers and sellers coming together of products, along with just car people and new technologies and all those sorts of things. And it continues just to, when you just think it's not going to get any better and the builds aren't going to get any better, they just do. And I don't know about you, but I look at everything from the welds to how they developed the suspension and how they made a mod. And there's the jokers, there's the Bluetooth drive shafts and those sorts of things you find out about, and SEMA fail builds, and we see all that. And but overall, it is it is one place where business comes together. Really, we become the center of the automotive universe of that week, of industry week, to see all the different manufacturers. Again, 2,500 or so manufacturers, small and big booths, guys that are just getting started, that they bet the farm on a widget, that they quit their job, developed a product, brought it to SEMA show, hoping to, sell a lot of them, or and just these widget makers up to the major, huge companies. It's just something to see. And now it's open on Friday to the public.
And that is such a cool piece, because it does, I think, open the opportunity to stoke the fire for that person that might not normally get access to it, or had heard about SEMA but didn't have an in terms of how they got into the show. And I absolutely, when you talk about the quality of builds, and there's nothing that makes me feel less talented than going to SEMA, because
I'm with you.
You walk around and I talked about the lowrider with all the chrome that Zach Pennock, I think is the guy's name, but like just an incredible vehicle. And I had followed it along for, he basically chronicled the build on YouTube and Instagram. And it was such a cool thing to see him kind of working to get it done before SEMA. You always hear about the stories of everybody trying to get their rides done before they have to get it there, and some of the crazy stories that go into it. But when you see it in person and you see that chrome pop, or even thinking back to last year, there was this gigantic jacked up truck that probably isn't even a personal preference of mine, but you couldn't help but stop and look at everything that went into it. And it just shows off how many talented people we have in this world, and is in this industry specifically. It is just one of the coolest things that you can do. If you're a car guy or car girl, I am telling you, if you haven't been to this show, you have to go. This is a bucket list thing all the way.
It's definitely, it's the number one show now. It's the number one automotive show. It's the number one show in Vegas every year. And it just keeps getting bigger and better. And we're expanding the campus again this year. We're adding more space. I think we're adding another 80,000 square feet of space, as we move into the hotels, the Westgate Hotel. So it's every automotive that, we get 7, 8, 9 OEs that show up every year. Ford comes in every year. All those different companies come in every year. And as well as just, again, large to small, you'll see a guy that's invented something that, we always walk by and we're like, gosh, I didn't think of that. I mean, that is a cool idea, right? It's some widget that somebody's come up with that, again, you hear the story all the time where they quit their job. They had this idea, they brought this product in, and, that's what moves America. I mean, we are inventors. We are passionate about what we do. We continue to push the envelope and find new ways and expand and innovate. And boy, talk about innovation. It's there at the SEMA show.
In spades. Very, very much so. Now, what does your week look like the week of SEMA? I can't imagine what your calendar looks like for that week.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. I get in usually the Friday or Saturday before the show starts. Show starts on Tuesday, but our team's there 2 weeks before. So Most of our team is there for almost a month, our show team, and set up and those sorts of things. So I get in on Friday typically, and walk the show a bit Saturday, go talk to, I like to talk to the manufacturers. I like to talk to them as they're building, setting up their booths, that sort of thing. There's always dinners every night of some sort. We have a political action network, so that group gets together on Sunday night, and there's just a variety of schedule. Once the show starts, it's crazy time for me. It's literally, I'm somewhere every half hour, 45 minutes to an hour speaking to some group. And it literally starts at 6 in the morning and goes to 11 at night. And, so but it's, I get obviously really pumped up for that. And I'm on adrenaline all week long. There are dinners and there are breakfasts and all those sorts of things, and speeches that have to happen and people you have to meet. And, but it's all fun. It's all awesome. I get to, typically on Tuesday, I get to have lunch with Richard Petty, which is, I mean, for a guy like me to get to do that, is pretty cool. Mohammed bin Salim, who is the head of FIA Formula One, shows up on Monday, and I do a tour with him of the show, prior to the show meeting starting, and just all week. There's celebrities that come in all week. There are, presidents of automotive companies that show up all week. All of that happens. And then, there's always a fire or two to put out, that we're involved in. But the team does a really good job of all of that. And we just run hard. It finishes Friday night with SEMA Fest, which is a full concert. And Saturday we do some cleanup. Usually Sunday I go home. And, Monday we start over again. We actually get a download Monday of what we could do better at. And that next week we spend pretty much the whole week kind of understanding the events and the good, the bad, the ugly, and how do we improve for the next year, and we start again. So we have a team that we have, of course, the SEMA and the PRI show. The PRI show is the racing organization group of us that does that in December. But we've got an amazing show team. The whole staff here at SEMA is just, different pockets of what we do, but passionate people, passionate about what we do, passionate about the industry, giving back to the industry, making sure the industry is strong and healthy, protecting the industry. All of that goes on, and again, I'm excited to be part of it.
Has there ever been a time where maybe you saw somebody that you've met a lot of celebrities, you've met a lot of these high profile folks in our industry? Has there ever been a time where maybe somebody kind of had that starstruck kind of, I don't know, even were you starstruck by any of these folks as you meet them or as they come by you?
I guess I still am. I still, get excited that we get to meet, race car drivers and presidents of companies and big companies, and but we've shared this passion together, right? We share this time together, and so and then you get to be friends over time. Jay Leno's probably a guy where, very starstruck probably the first time I met him, and now he's a pal. Now we sit and we talk and hang out a little bit together, and he's been really good to the industry. We're working on the Leno's Law right now, which is a bill here in California. So, in 95% of the cases, they're not pretentious. They're not, they're just like you and I. They're just car people that want to hang out and want to protect the industry and want to talk about the industry and want to talk about the car builds they're doing and all those sorts of things. So I tend to find most of them don't have big egos. When you really get down to, talking about things about cars and the industry and those sorts of things. But, treat everybody with respect, treat everybody with care. We get a lot of legislators. We get, a lot of senators and Congress people that come through. We get the head of EPA comes through. We get the head of California Resources Board comes through. But we put them in drift cars. We try to build those bridges to say, hey, look, we're all in this together, and let's figure out ways to work together rather than to try to put each other out of business.
I think that's the most underrated part about SEMA is the true impact that you're having over and above the show, right? With SEMA, with PRI, I think they are kind of the sexy things that get all of the attention when the SEMA show, but the organization itself and all of the good you're doing to make sure that you're representing the best interests of all of us and making sure that we can still do what we love. I don't know that the general public is truly aware of everything that you guys do. There's so much that goes into that. Can you talk to me a little bit about maybe that legislative side or more of that political side where you do have to get involved in trying to push for the betterment of our industry?
Yeah, we just met with the board and we're able to update our mission statement that says we're here to serve and protect the industry and to grow the industry. And so that's what we do. Obviously, there are bills that literally come up every day that the public doesn't even know about that could harm our industry. And so we're aware of those hundreds of bills a year that come up. And we have a pretty large legal team in DC. We do have lobbyists, and that we look at all these sorts of things and say, is it for us or is it against us? And if it's against us, what are we going to do to protect that?
Well, in you growing up in California and being centered in California, California drives a lot of this, right? There's a lot of the emissions regulations that come out of California. And I love your approach to being able to bring them in to the show and be able to really kind of, I don't know if wine and dine is the right word, but to get to know them, right? And to get that to know them in a way where you can have productive conversations. It isn't just like, this is the way it is and good luck. You can have a conversation, I'm assuming.
Yeah, I mean, obviously we have adversaries, and we work with both sides of the aisle. We work with both Republicans and Democrats when it serves our purpose, when it protects our needs. We are for the little guy, we are for the blue collar worker, we're for the industry, we're for the just the whole automotive, protecting the automotive ability to build and modify vehicles and to drive cars on the street and off road, racetracks, all those sorts of things. So, for example, we have been pushing hard on this EV mandate. President Trump signed on this EV mandate to eliminate EV mandates. That was literally our wording that he signed on for. And we're not against EVs. We're just saying that EVs should be part of the future. We're all for clean air. We just don't think they should be mandated. So there's plenty of hybrid EV, low carbon fuels, hydrogen, and America was built on innovation and continuing to push the envelope. And we should continue to do that, not have the government put their thumb on the scale and say it's EV and EV only. And so, if EV fits your driving needs, and if it's for, getting around, then, you should be able to pick that. If you need a 2,500 GMC truck to tow your whatever, and you're in the Midwest or whatever it might be, you should be able to do that. And the government shouldn't say you have to pick this EV. So, and there's plenty of innovation coming out. I mean, look, hybrids are pretty cool right now. You're going to see at the SEMA show this year more hydrogen-based internal combustion engine programs coming out, zero emissions. Again, there's different fuel systems that are coming out that are synthetic fuels, and there's just so much coming out, and it should be based on what you want to do and how you want to do it. And again, based on again, we all want clean air, but that's just one of the areas where we've been fighting on and protecting. There's currently a CRA that's before it just passed the Congress. It's before the Senate now, that would not give California its own ability to make rules. And so currently California can say, hey, we, for example, right now it's got to be 35% of all new vehicles sold in California by 2026 have to be EV, and 100% by 2035. Well, there's 11 other states that are following that rule. And again, we just don't think that's right. So we're fighting that one. We just up in Oregon, they were going to eliminate the ability to use leaded fuels at racetracks. and just lots of things. There's road closures, there's off-road areas that get closed down. There's noise limits at racetracks. There, all those sort of things that we have to protect. Whether it's lighting, whether it's a couple of years ago there was a bill in Georgia that you couldn't lift a vehicle, you couldn't lift a Jeep or a truck. We were able to get that turned around. So that sort of stuff we fight every single day, and most of the public and most of our industry doesn't know it, because a lot of the stuff happens behind the scenes, and we just kind of do our job and get that work done. But it takes, number one, the ability to challenge. We have a PAC and a super PAC that people can donate to, so that we've got money to be able to donate to campaigns where people are sympathetic to our causes. It's a part of the industry I never thought I'd be part of. Like, I'm not a political guy, but I got to say, I'm pretty much in the center of all that with SEMA right now. And with our league, we got an amazing legal team. We got an amazing team in DC that just looks at this stuff every single day. And we've become friends with a lot of legislators because of it.
It's incredible. And I can't fathom where everything would have gone had you not existed, right? I think had you not existed, we don't have a voice in this thing, right? And I was just reading last week, and I don't know if SEMA had a hand in this, but it was one of those. It was in Iowa, I believe, and they passed a bill to where you couldn't make a noise complaint around this racetrack unless you had a house there before the racetrack was there, right? And because you hear about it all the time, and it, like, to me, that is the most common sense thing in the world. If you build a house next to a racetrack, you should probably expect a little noise on a Friday night, right? And I just it's like in the Midwest, and probably even in parts of California or wherever, it's like somebody building a house next to a farm and then complaining that it smells. It's kind of one of those common sense things where it's amazing that we have to fight for that, but it is so true. So many racetracks are being put away because they have people complaining about noise, and subdivisions that weren't there when the track was started. And it just, to me, is such a common sense thing that the general public can't seem to get past, and it drives me crazy.
This week's episode of Beyond the Wrench is brought to us by Jasper Engines and Transmissions. Okay, your customer's engine or transmission has failed, but now is not the time for them to trade their vehicle. Not without a working engine or transmission. Besides, would they have kept their vehicle another 3 to 5 years if their engine or transmission had not let them down? If you answered yes, then Jasper Engines and Transmissions is your choice to give your customer's vehicle new life and many thousands of miles of enjoyable driving performance. When considering the high cost of a new or newer used vehicle, there's a pretty good case to be made for replacing a drivetrain component that has failed or is delivering poor performance. Rather than trading their car, truck, van, or SUV, install a quality remanufactured Jasper product for less than your customer would have to invest in a new vehicle or a newer used vehicle. Check out their website at jasperengines.com to learn more about the money-saving value of Jasper.
Yeah, we made a decision a few years ago where we used to do a lot of this work behind the scenes and never kind of poked our head up. And we decided a few years ago that we've got to be much louder in our voice, that we have to have a seat at the table, and that we're going to be public with a lot of these sorts of things, and then ask car enthusiasts to join us. And we could do that through a few areas. We've got a SEMA Action Network that you can join. We have a SEMA Plus, which is an individual membership program where just enthusiasts can join us. But we do that so that when we have something that is in your area that we think that we need to raise our voice, we can contact you and say, we need you to write a letter to your legislator. We need you to make these phone calls. Look, we're a $337 billion a year economic impact to the United States. We're a $53 billion a year in sales industry. And we got to have a voice. We got to stand up. We got to be heard. Stuff happens all the time that, and sometimes, we don't always find out about it right away. And so we need that voice. We're doing a lot of work now down to the consumer level, where we've always been a B2B. We've always been this kind of insular, almost membership industry. We're expanding out into the public and into the marketplace, still protecting our manufacturers, still protecting our members, still protecting the distribution. But we have to have a louder voice, and that's going to have to come from the consumer. And so we're doing a lot of work in that area to say, hey, we got to stand up for what we like and what we believe and not get run over anymore. So we use the term having a seat at the table a lot.
I bet. And if you're listening out there, I highly encourage you to go check that out and be a voice and help SEMA's causes, because if you are if you're listening to this podcast, most likely you have some interest in what we're talking about here, and I would encourage you to really get behind that, because that has a huge impact on all of us. Now, you mentioned something as you were talking there that I think is fascinating, which was you weren't an overly political person and really didn't see yourself in that light. And I'm kind of that same way, right? Like I kind of shy away from that. Have you, has there been anything that's helped you get more comfortable in that regard? Because it is an uncomfortable situation to be in.
Yeah, it is. When you really see what's going on, you hear about politics all the time, and you hear about these things, and you don't think you can make a difference. And to be honest, I probably felt that way a little bit. I was a SEMA member for over 40 years in my own business and manufacturing and those sorts of things, and didn't know. I mean, yeah, I voted when my local polls came up and had to vote on president on down to the congressman. I didn't always vote in the smaller stuff because I didn't know what was going on. But when I took on this role, and when I really came to SEMA and started to understand what was going on and how we could make a difference, and saw some wins happen, and we haven't won everything, but we've won a lot of things. You start to get encouraged. You start to say, okay, look, these legislators are just like us. I mean, you talk about they put their pants on one leg at a time and all that sort of stuff. But they listen to, for the most part, they'll listen to the public. And if you make a loud enough noise, and if you call them out on things they're not doing right, they want to get reelected. A lot of them are, you'd be surprised how many legislators are car people. You'd be surprised. I mean, Mark Wayne Mullen in Oklahoma, who's a senator in Oklahoma, shows up at Barrett Jackson every year. He sat at my table at the SEMA show this year at our banquet. All these guys show up, but he's a car collector. You see a lot of legislators like that who are tinker on the weekends, and they're not all these guys that are just in DC all the time trying to wreak havoc on us. So you find out that if you don't stand up, and if you don't have a voice, and if you don't push, and if you don't make yourself known, you'll get bowled over. You won't have a seat at that table. And so, I show up in DC several times a year to go talk to legislators, as does our team. And again, we have a 12-person team just in DC, on the Hill, talking every day to people. We invite them out to racetracks. We go to various functions that they're at. We make ourselves known. We do support those people in campaigns and those sorts of things where it makes sense for us on both sides of the aisle. But I found out if we didn't, and I got faced with the fact that our backs were against the wall, and if we didn't say something, and if we didn't do something, we were going to get rolled over. And that happened a few times when I first took on this position. And I was like, okay, this is what I got to do. This is what this team's got to do. We got to unite together. And I've got a great board of directors who sees it that way as well. We took the DC team from 5 people to 12. I think we're going to add a couple more this year. We're spending a lot more time in various states on the state level as well as on the federal level, just to make sure that our voice is heard, and we're winning. But I'd say we're winning more than we're losing.
Had I known there was a political element to cars when I was in school, I think I would have been looking at this entirely differently. I think it is fascinating. I think it is incredible what you're doing. And and to get yourself to that comfort level, because that's not something that I think comes naturally to most. And the fact that you've forced yourself out of your comfort zone in the greater good, or for the greater good, is a pretty incredible thing. So, on behalf of the car community, I thank you for doing that, because we desperately need it.
Well, thank you. And again, I think the board feels the same way. I mean, we've got a great board of directors who's loud voice. We have a great team. It takes all of us, and we've got some great members, and we've got some great people in the industry. Same thing, we've got industry members and manufacturers who, some were more comfortable than others, but we'll do these political things on the Hill. We've got one in June here in California where we're inviting members, to come with us to speak to, various legislators about our needs. And we do a rally in DC every year in May, where we invite members, SEMA members and manufacturers and all that to come with us. And we put a day and a half on of just getting out and making sure your voice is heard. And look, I realize that we'll come in and we'll talk to say a senator about this bill or something we want, recognizing that maybe 3 meetings later, there's somebody there against us. But if you walk the halls of the Senate and of the House, you'll see that this happens every single day, where there is just, it could be veterans, and it could be, different groups that have a need, and these meetings go on every single day. And you have to be there and do the same thing. And you have to make sure that they know who you are, and that you've got a voice, and that you're standing up for what you believe in. And I've heard, plenty of stories about, both sides, where they agree with us or they don't agree with us. Typically it's done in a matter of respect, typically, not always, but again, you just have to have your voice heard. I really do believe it makes a difference.
Have to feel like maybe it even gives you a little bit more of a respect level for politicians when you see kind of everything that they have to take in, and that you have all of these passionate voices that are trying to get their voice to be the loudest and heard the most. And trying to balance that as a politician has to be pretty stressful.
It is. And, they've got staff. A lot of times you're meeting with the staff and not actually that politician, but the staff really does, I call it they're the neck that turns the head of these legislators. And so sometimes people say, well, I had a meeting with this particular legislator, but it was really with the staff. I don't know if that made a difference. It makes a difference. So again, your voice has to be heard, and letters and phone calls, all those sorts of things from, if you're in that district, really does make a difference.
I would say, and I've, as you're talking, just learned so much from just this point of it. I did want to bring up tariffs. Obviously, that's a hot topic right now, and something that does have a pretty significant impact on all of us. And so I'm hoping that maybe I could pick your brain a little bit on tariffs and what you're seeing, and are we supposed to be scared right now? Are we overreacting, underreacting, somewhere in between?
Yeah, so it's we believe in evolution and not revolution, and we're probably in a revolution right now of this huge change. But we're trying to make sense of it, and it, depending on, let's see, we're into this conversation maybe 45 minutes now, and it may have changed in this time. But look, here's what we do know. We were at our team was at the Commerce Department last week, and we made sure our voice was heard as to what's going on and what our industry is seeing. Shortly after that, I think on Friday, it was announced that Canada and Mexico were going to be okay, and that those tariffs on auto parts wouldn't go into effect. And so that's helped us quite a bit. China is still, and some of these other nations are still, in the hopper as to what's going to happen. But I'll give you some idea of where we're sitting. I think, and we've got manufacturers again on both sides of this. We got manufacturers that are building everything here in the United States, so they're like, bring it on, because now we have a huge competitive advantage. And we have manufacturers that are building some parts overseas and some here. We've got manufacturers that are really doing everything overseas. So trying to represent all of that can be difficult. But for example, we've got manufacturers now that they're like, okay, we got chased out of the United States and we went overseas for various reasons. There was definitely a feeling that we didn't want manufacturing in some cases here in the US. So they were chased away, or it might have been for price or other things. I get all that. But now they want to bring their tooling and maybe even buy machinery and bring that stuff back to the US. Well, one thing that we are making sure our voice is heard on is that if we do want to bring, that manufacturer wants to bring his tooling back to the US, it's subject to a tariff. So, you got something against you already in wanting to bring that manufacturing back. You might want to bring a machine back. You might want to go buy a machine overseas to bring that machine here that fits your tooling so you can start manufacturing. That tooling is subject to, in some cases, 100% tariff. And so, maybe a $600,000 machine now becomes $1.1 million, $1.2 million, $1.3 million, somewhere in there. So we're making sure with the Commerce Department and with the president that they understand that we need some help in some of this sort of stuff to bring these things back. And then there's issues of even, are there enough foundries here in the United States? Or are there enough tooling manufacturers here we've chased a lot of that industry out of the US. And so not just our industry, if you think about a foundry that our manufacturers need, it's not just the automotive industry, it's several other industries. So are there enough foundries in the US? Or are there enough steel makers here in the US? All that stuff's got to get sorted out. So we agree as much as possible of bringing stuff back to America, but it's not an overnight change. And then you can even think about, there's bills of materials. A bill of material is, let's just say you're making a widget. It's got 30 pieces to it. It's got nuts and bolts, and it's got a chip, and it's got different components. You might have 70% of what you need here in the US, but you need to bring 30% of those items in from overseas. Well, if you can't bring those items in, you can't finish building that part. So you've got all this stuff stuck in, what's called raw goods or components that you now can't finish building this part and you can't get it out to sale. So a lot of stuff has to be worked through on that end to make sure that we can continue to move forward. I think it's a free market. We want to continue to be able to import and export. I do think that the tariffs and the conversation on tariffs does need to take place because it's been unfair. Importing to the US has been, pretty low on tariffs, and exporting has been pretty high. And so, a fair trade deal that allows free trade to go across nations makes a lot of sense. We've got some work to get there, and even understanding it. I mean, we get calls every day: is this part going to get tariffed, and what classifications is it under, and how do we get to it? So we're putting up a website right now that'll tell manufacturers which parts and which classes and how much tariff they're going to pay. That's going to change with all the negotiation that's going on, but we're trying to stay on top of it. It's a lot more complicated than just to say, hey, it's 100% tariff on China or something else. There's more to it. And again, I do see manufacturers bringing their products back to the US. I think that's great. I think it's going to make the US healthy. I think it's going to employ more people here in the US. I think it's going to, bring back America, and it's going to shrink down definitely the deficits that we have. We just have to be logical about how we go about it.
Yeah, I think everything you just said there is probably a common feeling for a lot of people, right? And that we want to be treated fairly, but also can't completely diminish everything else, right? So I give you a lot of credit to even stay up to speed on everything that's going on, because as you mentioned, it's a quickly changing and evolving and revolving situation in general. And I'm sure it drives some anxiety and some worry across everybody until you get a little bit more certainty as to what's going to happen. But at the same time, I also think that is another feather in your cap, right? As SEMA, as the organization, as the association, to be able to be that kind of shoulder to lean on, or that shoulder to cry on a little bit, and say, okay, what do we do here? And to have the ability to have a team that is educated and does know kind of the ins and outs, that can translate it to somebody like me, that you see that, for me, I kind of see the headlines, and I don't watch a ton of news anymore. And it just kind of, you if you can at least give us cliff notes so we know which direction we should be going, I think a lot of people would like that.
But people, thank you. We've got 170 staff here at SEMA, 4 locations, and we've got a lot of talent here. And so, I have to give the credit to the teams in our show team and our government affairs team and our SEMA garage team and our SEMA data team. We've just got a lot of great people here that get it and understand it and push the envelope and probably make me look smarter than I really am. And but that's what makes it all happen, right? That's how it all comes together. And we'll just continue to push in those areas. It's people ask me all the time, how is it going to end up? And I don't have that crystal ball. And if I really knew how this was going to all end up, I probably wouldn't be sitting in this chair. I would be in the stock market or somewhere else making a lot of money. So it does change daily. I do get updates literally every morning from our DC team. Sometimes at 1 o'clock in the morning and sometimes at 9 o'clock at night, and I've got to get on a phone call with them. But it's because there's so much passion here at SEMA to do the things we do. Yeah. And it's again, it's an honor to be part of that.
Oh my goodness. Yes. There's so much that goes into it. One last legal thing I want to talk about is the Leno bill that you mentioned earlier. And can you tell me a little bit about that? Because reading from a Cliff Notes version, it sounded like it was to protect the ability to drive some of the older stuff, right? And maybe not have the emissions apply to that. Am I off base there, or is it, are we in the ballpark?
Yeah, we're in the ballpark. What's going on is in most states, if there is a smog check rule, an emissions check rule, it will be for vehicles. It's a rolling 25 years. So it says, okay, in this time period, if 25 years back, you have to get your car smog checked every year or every 2 years, whatever it might be. Most states. California is 1977 on. And so any car from 1977 on has to go through an emissions test every 2 years. Well, first off, there aren't that many vehicles on the road 1977 on anymore. And if they are, they tend to be collector cars, which gets driven a few hundred miles a year. So the impact really on the environment is not huge. But the other thing to keep in mind is a lot of those cars don't have an OBD port. So they literally have to go to a smog station every 2 years and put on, rollers, a dyno. So they put a sniffer up the tailpipe. It has to go onto a set of rollers, and they do a test to make sure it's within compliance. The problem is those sort of smog stations are going away. Those sort of emissions check stations are going away. And so now if you can find one, you might drive 60 miles, and which is probably 60 miles each way, which is probably more than you're driving that vintage car
the entire time.
The entire time. And so you have to go through all of that sort of thing. We think a reasonable bill is 35 years rolling, which is 10 years more than any other state. And so it would be a rolling 35 years. So now going forward, 1990 on 1990, before 1990 vehicles would not have to go through that emission check. And again, these cars are collector cars for the most part. They're driven low miles every year. If you look at, it's only 1.25% of the vehicles on the road in California. It's not going to make a difference in emissions compliance. And we just think it's an unnecessary burden to have to go through that. So Jay Leno was one of the sponsors of the bill, and we're excited to have that. It's been duped into Leno's law, and it's been able to make its way kind of through the first couple phases. It's got a couple phases yet to go. It's got to go through the Senate and then the Assembly, and then on to the governor's office for signature. So we made the first hurdles, but it's got some ways to go.
Well, and thank you for kind of cleaning that up for me, because I do think that's very important as well. And it probably doesn't hurt to have Jay Leno standing up for you in that regard, right? It's nice to have somebody with a lot of notoriety that can stand up and speak on your behalf.
And just, Jay's one of those guys that doesn't necessarily like to be involved on the front pages of a political issue, but he thought it was so important, this particular issue, and that that there are ways to make this happen, and he was able to lend his name to this bill, because he's just such a passionate car guy and wants to see, he was talking, he and I both went up to Sacramento to testify a couple weeks ago, and he was talking about to these legislators how they've chased the movie industry out of California, and you're chasing automotive companies out of California, and chasing car guys out of California, or they're finding other ways to register these cars in other states, in Arizona or in, various Utah and different states. And California is actually losing out on that income of licensing and license tags and all those sorts of things. And, why make us go through all that? I mean, car guys are finding ways to make this happen. Let's just be legitimate about it.
Yeah. That
And quit
helps
trying to chase
everybody.
people. Yeah. Quit trying to chase car people out of California.
Another amazing thing that you're doing, your organization is doing. And again, I can't tell you how much we all appreciate that, because there is, regardless of what happens in California, it feels like there's a ripple effect throughout the nation. And the more that you can kind of stand tall for us, I think the better off the entire industry is. So many thanks to you there.
Thank you. Yeah. It's again, it's one of those things we just have to stand up for.
Got to end with maybe some stories that you've had. You've had a storied career, and I'll leave this a little open-ended, but I go to SEMA as much as I can, or each year, and try to, I think even in my own case, have so many different stories from SEMA over the years. I can only imagine your stories, but is there anything, or any, maybe kind of fun story, or just something that you think back on and maybe think, hey, that was pretty cool? I know that's a really open-ended question, but I'm just interested to hear if you've got any cool stories for us.
I probably have hundreds, but there's a few that come to mind. One that's probably pretty funny is I was walking the show probably 7 or 8 years ago. I was walking the show with Richard Petty, and he had to get from one spot to another. And so we're trying to get through the crowd, and all these guys will stop and sign autographs and take pictures and do all those sorts of things. So getting them through the show can be difficult, because they want to be kind. I mean, gosh, a Chip Foose will stay till 10 o'clock at night signing autographs every single day, right? These guys are just, there's so many amazing stories about everybody. And but I'll just tell you this Richard Petty story. We were walking through the crowd, and a well-endowed woman who was showing a bit of cleavage dropped something and bent down to pick it up right in front of Richard. And he took his sunglasses off and looked at me, and he goes, "Son, I think that she did that for both of us." and it was one of those moments where I was trying to be very professional and be very, all this going on and all this noise going on and all this shoving and pushing. And he just took a moment to break the kind of, ooh, it just happened, and have that kind of funny story. So there's just so many stories and so many things that happen every single year. And to see, men and women cry when they win an award, and to be so passionate about their build and what they've done, and risk really everything. I mean, selling everything you own to, because you've got this belief in this part of this program or what's going on, and to roll the dice that hard. It just continues. You never get tired of it. You never get tired of it. You never get tired of what happens at SEMA. And again, I'm just honored to do it for as long as I'll get to do it.
You're doing an incredible job. You and the entire SEMA team. I can't speak highly enough of everything that you do. You've built something and continued something that is incredibly special, not only to me, but to everybody in this industry. And I think even just talking about it, I still wear, I each year buy a SEMA hat and wear it all over the place. And even up here in Wisconsin, you'll have people pull you aside and say, hey, love the hat. It's a special thing for all of us in the car community, in truck community, to really embrace and celebrate all of those incredible people. The fact that you're able to get some of the power players that you do to come back each and every year along with the just incredibly huge crowds. And that's not even to mention the PRI side, right? We didn't talk about PRI. That
Right.
is also just an incredible thing. It just, when you look at all of the cool things that you guys are doing, and you're doing it for the right reasons, you're moving our entire industry in a great direction. Just can't speak highly enough of you and the entire team at SEMA. So thank you so much for joining the
Thank
show.
you. And thanks for giving us the opportunity to talk.
That wraps up another episode of Beyond the Wrench. If you liked this episode, please show your support by rating and following the podcast. You can also watch the video interviews on WrenchWay's YouTube channel. Speaking of WrenchWay, did you know Beyond the Wrench is managed and produced by the WrenchWay team? WrenchWay is an online community dedicated to promoting and improving automotive and diesel careers. We help technicians find the best shops to work at, and we also help auto, diesel, and CTE instructors get more support from local industry. You can learn more by visiting wrenchway.com.